I am speaking this morning with Phil Montero. Phil is the president of Montero Consulting and the founder and the creator of YouCanWorkFromAnywhere.com and the AnywhereOffice.com, two websites designed at what his passion is, which is helping people collaborate virtually, working from anywhere, and that includes leadership and CEOs. Phil has designed a course called The Art of Virtual Leadership. It's available online as a cloud-based delivery that you can do at your own pace, and I've taken it. It's exceptional. Good morning, Phil. How are you?
I'm doing great, Carl. How are you today?
I'm super. Phil, what I wanted to chat with you about for this vlog post is just that, virtual leadership. You are the perfect guy for me to talk to about this. Let's talk a little bit about trends that you see as you work with leaders. How are CEOs and executives and COOs of different organizations collaborating with each other across many, many thousands of miles? And I'm talking about within the same company, and also how do they network? What are you seeing as far as trends as how they network with each other?
Sure, Carl. Well, I mean, one of the things, if you want to call it a trend, is that it's increasing. And when I say it's increasing, what I mean is collaborating and managing people that you don't see every day. And that's when we talk about the Anywhere Office, that's what we're talking about, is it doesn't matter where you are, and it doesn't matter that you're not in the same place. And so what you're finding is, due to a number of things, I think just the nature of business being more global, that you're finding that CEOs and leaders are, again, managing their own teams that are maybe working at remote offices, working at client sites, coffee shops, airports, hotels, any number of places. But they're also starting to collaborate with peers across that distance, not just across distance, but across time as well. And they're using today's technology, the technology that's available, things particularly like this video, like what you and I are doing here with Skype, really allows that to happen. And it's allowing people to collaborate that never meet face to face. I mean, just as an example, you and I have worked on the Virtual Mastermind project, virtualmastermind.com together. And we've worked on a number of things together, and we've never met. I mean, we've met face to face via Skype like this on the camera, but I never sat down and had a beer with you. You've never been over to my house, but we Skype conversation like this. This is probably our primary form of communication for you and I.
Sure.
We don't really talk on the phone much. We shoot emails back and forth, but most of the time when we talk, this is the way we do it, and I think that's the trend you're seeing.
And as far as we know, the other person could be legless.
It's true. I could have my bunny slippers on right now.
but yeah, it is. And I tell you what, the video for me brings a richness to it, where I've been able to meet some very interesting people, some peers, and some advisors. And again, the premise behind sort of doing a mastermind using video, I've been able to not only hook up with you, and we've exchanged ideas, and you've taught me a lot about Twitter. I've done some work with you on LinkedIn and things like that. I've met people. We have a mutual friend, Chris Ducker, who's in the Philippines, and we connect with each other 12 hours different. I think it is tremendous, and I use the Skype tool, and we've used some other video sharing tools. Anything else you're witnessing as far as peer-to-peer collaboration, or maybe document sharing, or how are these people working together?
Yeah, well, there's other technologies. The thing that to be important, I mean, it's easy to just fall on talking about technology when you talk about this. But the one thing I'd like to emphasize, and that's why I think a technology like video helps, is that it's still a human endeavor. Collaboration, teamwork. We talk about virtual teamwork, but it's still a human endeavor. So what you want to find is the technologies that don't get in the way of that and actually enhance the personal connection, because it's all about know, like, and trust. When you work with someone across distance, and this is one of the things we emphasize in the Art of Virtual Leadership, is that, it's a matter of how do you take a team that may never see each other or maybe only see each other periodically and still get them to be a close-knit group. And the same thing for collaborating from CEO to CEO. I mean, how have you and I become to know, like, and trust each other? Well, part of it, it's informal communication. It's seeing each other's faces. It's you seeing my kid when he jumps up on my lap sometimes when he might be home and I'm working from my home office, or, me seeing your surroundings, that type of thing. But I think other technologies that would help with that meeting are things like web meeting software where you can share screens out. Now, a lot of people don't know that about Skype, but it actually has screen sharing built into it. So I know you and I've used that sometimes when we're talking about something, or you're showing me something on LinkedIn, or I'm showing you something on Twitter. We switch from seeing each other's faces to one of us showing our screen out. And again, that's almost like you're peering over my shoulder, like we were sitting at the same desk together or across a conference room table. So I think using screen sharing technologies that way. Also, you mentioned some of the other video technologies that we've played with for Virtual Mastermind. We wanted to find a way to have not just one-on-one video conferencing, and some of the other platforms will allow you to do maybe 3, but we wanted 8 or 10. And how do we do that? So we've tested that as well and found some solutions that really work well in that space too. So I think it's, as I said, document sharing. I'm a big fan of Google Docs, which is free to begin with, and will actually allow multiple people logged into, for example, Google. If you're not familiar with it, Google Docs or Google Apps, for those that are watching this, I know you're familiar with it, but is like an online office suite, so like Word or Excel and a version of PowerPoint. You can actually upload a Word document, but then multiple people from their desktops or their computers can all be logged in and actually be seeing, commenting, and editing on a single document in real time. So we're not talking about me making edits and then emailing it to you and you making your changes. But we're all logged in. As I make a comment or as I change something, you actually see the cursor moving and you see the text moving. So there's this collaboration that goes on. And you could do that in turn with a conference call. It doesn't have to be video. Maybe what we're sharing is the document on screen. And then we're all on a conference call talking about it together. And again, it's almost like being there. It's almost like we're all sitting around one laptop, looking at a document, making changes together. And I think that it's those tools and the increase in broadband, the availability of high speed these days, not even just from your home or your office, but from a mobile standpoint. I mean, mobile devices like iPads and iPhones and Android devices, Android tablets, they're all getting high speed connection. And a lot of these applications are being available for that. I can make video calls from my iPhone using Skype, and it's amazing. The quality is great, and I can do it from almost anywhere. So I'm not even, relegated to just being in my office on that high-speed connection.
Yeah, some of these things are certainly more convenient, too. I know that when I interviewed Chris Ducker in this series, we talked about Dropbox. And I use Dropbox in those situations when I record these videos for a customer as a service. It's very easy to set up a password-protected file for us to be able to share those documents. I'd never be able to send them via email. I don't feel like burning them to a disk and sending them through snail mail. So we can upload them using that technology. One last thing I'd like to ask you, and it has to do again with these human factors. You talked about it. When you are collaborating virtually, sometimes this might be more important when it's when it's you and I and it's CEO to CEO, we're sort of engaged with each other because we're very interested in what we have to say. But what about that employee, that sales guy who's out there on an island in Guantanamo Bay, and he's and he's selling for you, and he's not really engaged? What do you do? I mean, how do you use the technology and maybe the human factors to engage those people to try and get performance effectiveness out of folks when collaborating and meeting virtually?
That's a great question, Carl, because that is one of the biggest challenges when you're dealing with people remotely, managing them, particularly when you're having meetings, real-time meetings remotely, is how do you keep that engagement? I know when we've taught some of our workshops live remotely, when we weren't using video, you could tell that people were kind of drifting off, and they might be using their BlackBerry or checking their email and
sometimes they forget to mute, right?
Yeah, and then you hear that you hear what's going on in the background, and then you can kind of peg them on it. And but I think there's a couple of things that you can do in order to enhance that engagement. I think first off, I would suggest trying to keep virtual meetings much shorter than live in-person meetings. I mean, live in-person, if someone's going to come to a conference room or something, to have a meeting that lasts 45 minutes, an hour is typical. I think a typical meeting would last that long. When you're doing a virtual meeting, whether it's by teleconference or video conference or a web meeting, I would suggest trying to keep it much more concise and on target. So maybe take a 60-minute meeting and break it into 3 20-minute meetings or 2 30-minute meetings. That allows people to be focused, and instead of dealing with many topics, maybe just focus on one topic, so there's like a laser-like focus that way.
Okay.
And secondly, I think when you have those meetings, have a clear agenda and distribute it beforehand via email or shared document or however it is that you share docs. And, the thing about this is it's not, these are probably tips that would work well for whether you're having a meeting on-site or off-site, but, or remotely this way. But I think it's even more important when you're doing it virtually this way. And if you're not using video, again, we mentioned before that when you have video, you can kind of keep an eye on everybody, and people are less likely to drift off or check email because you can see them. But, there's a lot of great meetings that you can still have via teleconference or conference call. But in that case, you might want to call people out. Some things I often suggest for teams is to have a web page or maybe just a sheet of paper with kind of almost like a clock format in a circle with a picture of each person that's involved with the meeting. And then when you're talking about something or looking for feedback, rather than just saying, does anyone have anything to contribute about this? Maybe you go one by one. John, what are your thoughts on this? Susan, Cheryl, Jim, and you go one by one. And, it's something old school, and people and teachers have been doing this for years,
Sure.
But they did to do that because it works. And if people know that you're going to call on them, then they're more likely to be present and engaged in the conversation that way, I think.
I would agree. The virtual technology certainly lends itself to a new series of challenges that sort of amplify the same problems that, as you mentioned, teachers have had. But they also have bridged a gap and allows us to work in ways that we hadn't worked before. And whether that's CEO collaboration, peer-to-peer, or CEO to employee or employee work team, either way, it works out well.
Yeah, one of the things I think, Karl, is one of the things that we talk about in leadership is if you're not a strong leader, if your leadership skills are a little weaker, you could probably get by in person, or if you're from collaboration, or let's not even just say leadership, your communication skills. Mm-hmm. If they are not quite up to snuff, you might be able to get by when you're on site and in person that way. But those things get magnified when there's distance involved, whether it's just physical distance or time distance. So, it's more important than ever to be more conscious about the way you communicate and to really brush up on your leadership or your collaboration or communication skills when you're doing it across distance that way, I think.
That's an excellent point, Phil, and I've seen evidence of that. It's funny, I used to teach executives public speaking skills, and one of the things I used to tell them is, you know how enthusiastic and exuberant and loud and dynamic you sound on the inside? Magnify that by 4 or 5 times when it comes out, because it won't sound that loud and dynamic on the outside. And I think you're dealing with a sort of a similar phenomenon here when it goes across the technology stream. Definitely. As always, it's been great talking to you. I've learned a lot. I'm sure our viewers have as well. He's Phil Montero from theanywhereoffice.com, and you can work from anywhere.com. Check him out to learn the art of virtual leadership. And, Phil, I look forward to our chats again.
Oh, as always, it's a pleasure, Karl. Thanks for having me on.
Take care.